Welcome back, everyone, to Looking for the Ocean, the show where we watch everything that Pixar has ever made and we talk about what it means to us. I'm Mark Young. I am joined, as always, by Danny Vincent, and today we have a very special guest, Don Reinert. Say hello to Don, Danny. Hello, dog, as well.
No, you're gonna cut the dog out. Don't acknowledge the dog.
Why would I cut the dog out?
Why would you keep the dog in? It's gonna be embarrassing. Don't leave the dog in.
All right. And
I'm not
we're back,
to be clear.
All right.
I'm looking for a sweater that will keep him quiet the entire time.
What?
If we put if I put the sweater on him, he doesn't bark.
Okay.
He's too scared.
Don and I were just talking about how we both live in New York. We're like not too far from each other. And Don, I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about what you were saying again on mic about how you and Danny know each other.
Yeah, so we grew up together. I've known Danny since like the 4th grade or somewhere around then. I don't know how old you are when...
It would have been 5th grade. I didn't live in Chesterton 4th grade.
Perfect, yeah. So we've known each other since 5th grade, been friends since then, and kept in touch after college, and particularly, or during and after college, and particularly would go see movies together. And this is one of the movies that we saw together. I believe this would be the summer after our freshman year, going by the release date.
Nope. Oh, wait. Yep.
Yep.
I always remember Dawn. It's, I don't know. How do I want to say this? Because it might sound weird coming out of my mouth. It sounds fine in my head, but then when it comes out of my mouth, I'm like, that sounds weird. But in a way, I'm surprised you're the friend who's made it this long from high school, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm always like, yeah, wow. Dawn is someone I can always count on, like, to just pick up a conversation with, like, 6 months later. Or, like, something like that,
Yeah, that is the very nice part of... We especially in college, we wouldn't talk to each other for like 6 months, and then it was like bam, right back to normal as soon as we got in the car to go somewhere. So
yeah,
I guess that's a universal thing, isn't it? It's like you can be really tight with people because you're able to spend so little time with them, and not feel weird about it. I don't know. I don't hear that talked about a whole lot. Is that long-lasting friendships actually, you want to like make time for people and put effort into your relationships, but I think we all have those people. Like, I have a few people from Carbondale where we went to college where I'm like, I could text them out of the blue and it would be like we started up, just like it was, but I don't actually put any time into those relationships, and yet I consider them not ride or die people, but just always this understanding of like, I will be there for you.
There's definitely some people who I know are on our schedule for this year, people who are kind of like, well, Dawn, I think you and I, since Barbenheimer, we've been texting way more often than before Barbenheimer. But before, or even actually, I think maybe that kind of more started when I met you up with you in New York the summer before. But even then, before then, it was definitely something where I'd be like, I remember when I first went to New York 2 years ago, and I was like, hey, Don, you're still visiting New York? And you're like, visiting? I live here now. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm visiting this week. And that's why we met up, and we got ice cream, I remember.
yeah.
But so, yeah. Don, are you like a big Pixar guy?
No.
Wait. Sorry,
okay,
before we talk about Pixar, did he say on mic what he does? Like, what is,
no.
I think you have an interesting job, or do you not? I'm just forgetting.
I do not, no. Just tech. Just
sorry. You're employed.
Yeah, boring remote job.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, we have a lot of people. A tech job is pretty good.
Yeah, we have a lot of people who don't. We have a lot of people on the podcast who don't have jobs.
It's funny. The two guys now, Don and then the other guy that I met, have like kind of impressive tech jobs. Remember, we had coffee with the one guy who was like, "Oh, Ben, what's going on in your life?" And he was like, "Well, I bought my family a house, and so they can like a car, so they can like commute and we can see each other." And I was like, haha, well, I'm not too unhappy with my life right now, but I'm just not gonna give you all the updates after hearing that. So, yes, Danny, what do you?
You can keep
what are you
talking. I just
gesturing
realized I might have closed the doors to the litter box, so I'm gonna just quickly check that. I'll be right back. That's like an actual emergency thing. I feel like.
I'm sorry. I just love that your day is like full of misadventure because of the dog sitting.
Well, I just saw the cat walk over to a box and looks like he's about to poop, so I'm like, I really hope I didn't close the litter box. So you can keep talking though. Don't worry. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna kind of go on through our little structure here, and I want to ask Don. So, well, it was like, what part of your life was Pixar or / is Pixar, if you even remember?
I guess I mean my youth. You know, I was thinking, like, looking at the release list here, Inside Out was definitely the last Pixar film that I made an effort to go see. I saw Coco.
Wow. Okay, good. I was about to be like, no Coco? Come on.
And I mean, just like make an effort. Like I've seen Coco, seen Cars. I saw Cars 3, but like just as an excuse to get out of the summer heat. You know, I'm not gonna go through the whole list, but I think after Inside Out, I stopped paying attention. I don't know that much about The Good Dinosaur, but I think I was just at exactly.
No one knows anything about The Good Dinosaur. The Good Dinosaur. It's so interesting to me, The Good Dinosaur. Maybe I should save this for the Good Dinosaur episode, but I was on a box office forum, which is all the people Don met at Barbenheimer. And everyone was convinced The Good Dinosaur was going to be huge because the big movies that summer were Inside Out and Jurassic World. So it's like, Pixar doing dinosaurs? Holy shit, this is going to be the biggest movie of the year. And then it was like, Pixar's first bomb. So, anyway.
Yeah. I did not find it compelling at all. So I think that was like a good clean break of like, that's behind me. But then
sequels happened, so.
Yeah, and especially like with Coco, I mean, they keep coming out. They keep coming out with some good stuff. So to truly like put Pixar down and never pick it back up would be foolish.
Do you have a favorite?
That is so hard, honestly. I mean, I guess I haven't put a tremendous amount of thought in it. So like to pick between all of like the heavy hitters from when we were kids, I don't really think I could.
Well, I just wonder if you were at some event and you had to put one on, what do you think that would be?
Ooh, but Mark, that's a loaded question, because you see, I'm putting one on an event. I'm not gonna pick like Coco. I don't want people to cry at this event.
Well, let me change it. Not an event. Let's say a situation. Let's say you just pick some period in time. You have three nephews.
I have three nephews, and so if I like. Uncle Don, we've never seen a Pixar film before. For some ungodly reason, my parents won't put them on TV. Like, which one am I putting on?
Mm-hmm.
Well, damn, because that's also a loaded scenario. Just like
I picked The Incredibles because that's one a kid would enjoy the most.
Yeah. Because like, I guess my eye is being drawn to Cars. Honestly, if we're just gonna like, I won't say it's like the best or whatever, but it's like, it's fun. It's all right.
Low stakes, no violence.
Let's say you are at the Museum of Moving Image and you get to program a screening of one of them with the people there in attendance. Which one do you pick? Because I don't think you pick Cars then, because that's not your favorite. Cars is your one you show a kid. What's the one you would show because you get the opportunity to show it in front of everyone?
Wow.
And it doesn't have to be like WALL-E because it's the most artistic. It's just your favorite one. Because they'll show WALL-E anyway. That's it. If you want to pick WALL-E, feel free to pick WALL-E. I'm just using that as like, don't pick WALL-E because it's like the one that like, well, that's the one that belongs in the museum,
I don't know, but maybe The Incredibles. I always liked, and like when we get into what I think of with Pixar, I don't know. It's the same thing with like Cars as well. Is that I like the little bits of Art Deco. I find Pixar films to be like pretty like serene. Cars has like incredible backgrounds and like vistas. And every time I go up to like our cabin and see the clouds over the lake, I always think of like the clouds in Toy Story. And I mean, Pixar's reused that over and over again, the big fluffy clouds. So like, I don't know, they're all just so calm and pretty. And so I have to go with The Incredibles because it's just more fun. It's like an action movie, but not as out there. I don't know.
But then, do you think of what's your conception of Pixar overall? Like, if you had to take it back from like, this is the movie I would choose to represent Pixar. Why would that be?
My conception of Pixar, at least I've always thought about it, is in comparison. So I think of Pixar as like a bit of a middle ground between Disney and DreamWorks, where again, this is relatively uneducated opinion, whatever, but like I think of Disney as not like kiddie in a dismissive sense, but like very like young childhood focused, and then DreamWorks animations like creative and like still for kids, but I think of it as like a little bit more like harsher animation, a little bit more like jokes that are winks and nods towards parents, a little like less clean. Where Pixar, and I forgot that Steve Jobs did run it. It's almost like the like Apple of of like animation studios, where it's really polished, like imaginative, but like not so out there. Where DreamWorks like, let's do an ogre, or like let's do a dragon. Where Pixar is like very emotional.
Let's get Chris Rock and Ben Stiller to riff sublimely for 90 minutes.
Yes, exactly. Like where Pixar, it's again I think the jazz and the Art Deco are kind of like signifiers that, you know, it is like their house style, but it's also that's like appealing to like a kind of person almost, or something, where trying to be a little highfalutin, but it's still a kid's movie.
I like that. I almost feel like you're too educated because you're like qualifying your answer by saying it's for a kind of person instead of saying what kind of person that is. I think we get a lot of insight out of like quote uneducated responses to this question. Like Danny's parents came on and I think they were like, Pixar is for children. It's like you said, it's like polish. You can expect a good product, something that you would be happy to take your family to. And I think that's very useful. Have you seen Turning Red?
No.
Well, let me tell you, it's in theaters next month. And this episode comes out the day Soul finally gets its long-awaited wide release in theaters. Sorry, I had to get that out there. We have to market the company that this podcast is about, even though we get no pay from them.
No, I've yet to see Turning Red. That has been on my schedule, but have not like put forth the time.
Turning Red is worth your time. I actually put it on a little bit this morning as I was prepping for this to kind of do that, like get my mind clear, do some comparing to Inside Out.
Sure, because female protagonist.
Yeah.
Sure, because modern female protagonists compared to like Brave.
Are you being sarcastic? Because I actually think that is actually why I did it.
No, I'm not being sarcastic. I assume that was why, because Riley and May are both like tween girls.
Yeah. And I don't know, and that was useful. But anyway, the big takeaway from that was like, man, I just really love Turning Red. So I recommend Turning Red. And then our last thing we like to ask people is there a point at which you consciously moved away from Pixar? Like
when you were like a child going into... Because you said you went back for Inside Out, but like, was there a time before then that you just kind of stopped for a bit because you're like, cartoons are for babies, or something like that?
I'll say, again, looking at release schedule, I'm going to say I probably checked out after Up. Because Toy Story 3, I didn't, at the time, like, care or anything. And I was like, it's just more, like, sequel bait. And, like, I know that has not held up in retrospect, but...
Cars 2 follows it up. The best Cars movie. You missed it.
Toy Story 3, Cars 2... And then I think at that point I was so clocked out that like Brave didn't really register, even though it was original. And then Monsters University, again, another sequel. And I was like, man, I do not. I had to, when I was like really young, the concept of like the Disney Vault had me in a vice grip. And so we got like Lion King 2.5 or whatever. Because it was like, straight to DVD, but it's going in the Disney Vault. And I was a kid, and I was like, that's real. This is never going to come again. We have to get this. And then I've just been burned by so many like Disney direct to DVD sequels. And that at that point in my life, I was like, all right, I'm not watching a sequel to a cartoon like ever again.
Which meant that the 2010s for Pixar were rough for you. I actually think, Don, that's a really good like transition point to talking about Inside Out, because I think Inside Out was very similar for you that it was for a lot of people, is that, you know, Pixar's coming off of like a bunch of sequels basically, and Brave, which is definitely considered to be a middling Pixar movie along the vein of the first Cars. I mean, that's the general consensus around Brave. And then here it is, like, the guy who directed Up and Monsters, Inc. comes a new original idea that's literally about your emotions talking and having emotions. And it's like, here's this creative world. Here's what Pixar is known to do. Here are characters that look like nothing we've done before. And it's like, oh, wow. This is the return of peak Pixar. And then, of course, they don't really do anything with it until, I would say, honestly, until Soul comes around, because Coco feels like a one-off, too. And Coco's marketing, of course, was very much like, they're just doing the Book of Life again, was most people's attitude towards that. So, but Inside Out, you know, comes out, rave reviews, absolutely, like, considered an immediate Pixar classic, which is something that even I'd say Coco doesn't really get that reputation until it gets on home video. But comes out instant classic, makes $300 million at the U.S. box office. As we said in our Ed Catmull episode, it opens to number 2 at the box office, which is something Pixar was afraid of, if not for the fact it becomes the highest grossing film ever to open at number 2. And Pixar's, I believe, biggest opening weekend yet up to that point with original. Toy Story 3 obviously opens higher. But with $90 million, over $90 million on opening weekend. Because I forgot to, I really wanted to. There was a trailer for this movie, not the teaser trailer, but there's one trailer for this movie I remember loving. And it's set to like More Than a Feeling. And I remember it like giving me chills like in the theater every time this trailer would play. I'm like, oh yeah, that looks like peak Pixar there. But yes, this movie comes out, rave reviews, huge box office, 7th highest grossing film of 2015 with $858 million worldwide, is nominated at the Oscars for Best Animated Feature and Best Original Screenplay. I believe this is the last Pixar movie to be nominated for a Screenplay Award up to this point. Because Soul misses. And I remember that was a thing, because I was hoping Soul would get nominated, because then we get a rare occasion where a writer is nominated for both adapted and original in the same year, because Kemp Powers wrote Soul and One Night in Miami. But yes, this is a huge financial success, huge critical success, greatly considered one of Pixar's finest films in recent memory, if not one of their finest films ever. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good intro to what Inside Out is. But where'd we first experience Inside Out? I may go first because I can lead directly into Dawn, because I know when Dawn saw it first. I saw Inside Out, I believe, opening night with my mom, because it was a Pixar movie that I thought looked incredible. My mom likes Pixar movies, so we both go to see it opening night. If I remember right, what was this, 2015? So Tim is in... Yes. So I go and judge Speech and Debate Nationals in 2016. In 2015, my dad and Tim are at Speech and Debate Nationals, like, because this is Tim, my younger brother Tim's senior year. So he's at Speech and Debate Nationals when this comes out. So my mom and I go and see Inside Out. We both think it's fantastic. We both don't like... Well, I like the lava short one. Mom goes, that volcano thing was stupid. And then we go see it again, I think, the following Tuesday when my dad is back, because my dad loves Pixar. And he's like, why didn't you wait for me? It's because Danny couldn't wait. And Danny knew he was going to want to see it again. And I believe then a few weeks later, I see it with Dawn a third time, which, Dawn, I don't know what you remember out of seeing it, but what I remember is the people behind me were kids I knew from work. And I was like, before the movie, we were talking to the trust, like, fuck this, fuck yeah, that looks fucking stupid, blah, blah. And then the kid's like, is that Hawkeye in front of me? And I go, oh shit, the kid behind me, I know. Oh no, we've been swearing the whole time. Oh no. But yeah, that's, and then, you know, saw it again when it played at the student center, where we couldn't hear the audio at all because, they played it at the football field at our school. Couldn't hear it at all. You know, just a movie I revisit every time. Like there's last time I saw it before this was before Soul came out, and I ran for Pete Docters. So yeah. But Don, tell me about your experience of Inside Out.
Wow. Well, I'm gonna be a garbage guest to say I remember almost nothing about the original screening. I have like a positive impression, positive memory.
You know what I also do remember about that screening? Sorry to cut in. I do remember we also maybe we weren't talking to the trailers about the trailers, but I think we were just talking about Mad Max Fury Road because we hadn't seen each other since because I saw Mad Max Fury Road with someone else. I hadn't seen it with you, and so we were talking about Mad Max Fury Road because that, again, summer of 2015 was basically Inside Out Mad Max Fury Road. So we talked about that in our last episode, or 2 episodes ago. But yeah, I remember us talking about Fury Road a lot before the movie started. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I remember very little about the initial viewing besides, the emotional impact, being impressed, and then also like getting ready for this recording, I was thinking, trying to like cast my mind back then. And I remember a lot of the discussion around the movie being like praised as a example of like how to conceptualize your emotions or like how to think through these kinds of things, like just like psychiatrists or psychologists and neuroscientists or whatever being like, hey, it's kind of close, or like, good for a lay audience, and even being not like used but like referenced to a degree for people who are learning to handle their emotions or like deal with addiction or whatever, and like here's like a fun lighthearted thing, but also your emotions are like kind of separate and somewhat controllable and stuff like that. So the movie is like a learning tool or whatever. I remember thinking was really interesting, but doing a quick double check on that today seems to have gone like pretty much nowhere. So I think that was just release hype.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, I read about that too a little bit. It's like, oh man, the psychologists really love the movie about emotions. It's like, wow. Bird Monthly thinks The Big Year is the greatest film of all time.
True.
But I don't know, whatever. The first time that I saw this, Danny, was on that football field that you talked about when it showed at our school. It's funny because I wonder, like, I think that must have been like the year that we started knowing each other, but I didn't go with you. I went with my girlfriend at the time, and then it was like a double date situation. And we were all firmly in the camp of, I think there are like 2 camps for this movie, is like the people that are like, what a great attempt at conceptualizing emotions or representing emotions, and then there are the other people that are like, this is not how my mind works, and I reject this movie entirely. And I think that was originally like the group that I went in. That was kind of our general consensus. And the thing I remember about seeing it the first time is that I didn't remember a whole lot about the movie, like watching it through the first time. And now, as of this recording, I have seen it 2.5 times, because when I watched it yesterday, I had the same thing where just the whole time I was watching this movie, I could not concentrate on it because my brain just rejected it. And then I had to reset myself, and I had to watch a bit of Turning Red, and then I watched like 40 minutes of this movie coming in. And now I think finally on my 2.5 watch, I'm finally like coming around to it on its own terms. But the first 2 times I saw it, I just had the hardest time like accepting that this is how the movie was going to be. And of course, like the people around me, supported that. I think even now it's not like I'm kind of moving off of our first time we saw it talk, but even now I'm kind of like I have a very hard time with this film, just like putting it in my brain.
I do remember when we saw Coco. Me and Mark, when we saw Coco for the first time, we went with a large group of our friends to just see it. And the interesting thing I found about this movie, and I'm bringing this up because we are all white people on this recording, is I mentioned that inside, with the exception of Mark in this story, okay, we all talk. I was like, well, Inside Out was the last great Pixar movie. This kind of became a discussion before the movie where every white person there besides Mark was like, yeah, Inside Out was great, and every person of color was like, that's not my life. What? This girl's crying about having to move to San Francisco and live in a giant house? Fuck her. You know, like, and I thought that was a really interesting thing I noticed when we, I feel like that's an interesting point that I should give credence to, even if it doesn't apply to anyone in this recording, because that's something I've noticed pop up over the years, that people who, not necessarily people of color, but also people who come from a different socioeconomic background, are very opposed to this movie because the whole premise is this girl's mad that she's moving to a huge ass house in San Francisco. I can't relate to that. That never happened to me growing up, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where I would be. I'm glad that you were a little late, Danny, because it meant that I could finish my breakfast. And if I had not finished that breakfast, I would be coming on here like I would be spewing some hateful things based on that very take, because I don't know if it comes from a place of like whiteness. Like obviously everything I do unavoidably comes from a place of whiteness. But like this movie is so frustrating, partly because it's about like these people who seem like, you know, stereotypical America, you know, where's the Greta Gerwig adaptation of a Pixar movie, right? And that's part of what's so annoying about it. You used to live in San Francisco?
I was trying to quote Lady Bird when she's like, I used to live in Sacramento, but I was like, San Francisco.
Wow, what an iconic line from Lady Bird. I used to live in a fucking place. All right.
The whole movie's about Sacramento.
Sorry, I don't even know if I was articulate there. I was just like, yeah, this movie makes people angry as well. But
I like a quick point and then like a half point. I don't know if we want to like follow that segue yet, but like the quick point is like that's so interesting how hard you bounced off of it. You know, usually when I think of like somebody bouncing off a movie, it's either like flatly rejecting a children's movie or like flatly rejecting a violent mafia movie because it's like not what they want. But I don't know, it's very like, it was shocking to me to hear somebody watch a Pixar movie and be like, I hate this. I completely disagree with it. That's so funny to me. And I had the exact opposite where I saw, you know, with Danny 9 years ago, never rewatched it, never like thought that much about it. But then rewatching it yesterday, I was like almost remembering beat for beat. Like it was so familiar for some reason, the broccoli, the clown, and then obviously the apex at the end with the rocket ship, like it felt like I watched the movie a week ago. So that's crazy that you hated it so much that you remember anything at all. Or I don't know, man. Clearly I liked it more than I thought I did. And then sorry. Go on. I just want to put the stake in the ground, and we can come back if we want. But yeah, the discussion of like, this is so unfamiliar, like this family. I noted that the dad works in tech, his startup Brang, and he talked about doing layoffs. So he's a boss. So he's like an exec in tech dealing directly with VC, like obviously very well afforded. And that like the material conditions or whatever, that was like the first thing I thought of, like, oh, hockey, like her parents are home all the time. And like they also, you know, have their emotions together, so they're able to do all these good memories. And we don't have to go like too deep into the psychology quite yet, but I think going back to the like initial reaction in the movie of, oh, is this such a good teaching tool or whatever, there's also that initial reaction in the movie of, oh, I want to see the sick and twisted version of this. Like, wouldn't it be so funny if, you know, they did an Inside Out 2 where the person like was on drugs, or how would this look like if they had like,
it's kind of like Inception in a way, too. I remember when Inception came out, the whole thing was like, these people are just in hotels and, like, skiing in a dream. That's not what people dream. Why are they, like, why isn't everything just falling apart constantly? Like, and not, like, in Inception. I mean, like, why isn't, like, things just flip, you know? Why isn't this more trippy, you know?
Yeah. or what, what about somebody who's born like without joy, whatever. So we don't have to go like too far into that counterexample.
Yeah.
But those, like, what if it was sick and twisted? That's the same thing with the, like, what if it was for somebody who wasn't from an awesome, like, upbringing with supportive parents? Like, would they have all these same islands? Like, oh, she fell apart when she moved, but how would these, like, basic childhood emotions deal with, like, abuse or absent parents or whatever? So not to be like, oh, I'm the Joker, baby, I'm so sick and twisted, but that that was my first thing too, not to dislike the movie, but like, this exact story is only possible because her parents got money.
Yeah, and I think my response to that and also to myself is that, like, that is me wanting this movie to be something that it's not, And I think that's why I needed to watch it another half time before I came on here, because the first time I was just like, I want this to be something else. And then the second time around, I'm like, you know what? I know what's going to happen now. I have to rewatch this movie, not expecting anything else, not thinking about what could be, but actually to, like, buy into this world and the rules of these characters and just follow it out. And I think watching something like Turning Red, where, like, all of their emotions are revealed through action, and the production design is like the opposite of, like, super minimalist Inside Out. It was just nice to have something that kind of clarified Inside Out for me and made it like manageable in my brain, and that has kind of put me at peace with it too.
I think also, and this is I know Death of the Author, blah blah blah, but I think Pete Docter's latter two features, Soul and this, are so clearly, like, I don't want to say autobiographical, but, like, it's something where it's like, this is a movie about my daughter and how I don't understand her anymore. Let me make a movie trying to work through that. Because my daughter is... I just noticed on Wikipedia, I remembered this also from just my knowledge of the film, is the idea came from him noticing his daughter was becoming quiet and more reserved as she became older. So it's like, what is going on in her head? Well, let me make a movie about that. Which I think plays into, of course, the father being very well off, because, of course, Pete Docter's family is well off because they are... He's an Academy Award-winning director at the biggest grossing film, like, company ever, So, but yeah, but
yeah, it is. I don't know. It does seem a little bit dishonest that none of the characters have emotional problems, and I don't know. Maybe people don't.
They do. They get it over the film. Sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, like, no one is like. Well, this is exactly what, Don, you were talking about, is like, why I'm like, why doesn't one of these people have, like, crippling depression or something like that?
That's what the sequel's about. Didn't you see the trailer? Anxiety's gonna be there. It's about anxiety.
Yeah.
I love that Inside Out 2 is coming out now, and we can make all these jokes about, like, I don't know, anxiety. Anxiety isn't, like, exactly this, but it just makes me... I'm looking forward to people being like, wow, Inside Out 2 is really woke, but I don't know why it's going to be woke yet. I just predict that Inside Out 2 is going to be woke somehow.
I mean, I think, I remember the headcanon being of this movie, a big thing was, why does Riley have men emotions when everyone else we see only has their own gender emotions? And the obvious actual answer is because she's our main character. And that is why we have different genders in her head. Because we can't have an all-female cast because it's 2015. That's next year we're going to put out a Ghostbusters movie with all women. It's going to make everyone go insane. So we can't do that. But, everyone... I think there's a pretty solid headcanon that I always saw where it was like, well, she's going to be non-binary. Well, they're going to be non-binary, and realize that later on in life. And like, well, that's interesting. Sure. I will accept that as an idea, but also I think Pixar wasn't thinking that far ahead.
No, that is such a more interesting, like, headcanon or fan theory where inside the other people's heads, and the montage at the end of the movie really makes it clear, is not only other people's heads, their emotions are all like homogenous, they all have the glasses, they're all the same gender, blah blah blah. But I also realized all the other characters, the inside of their head has a backdrop to the stage to make it more interesting. Like it's just simplifying everything so that it's like more interesting in these brief flashes, right? Because inside of Riley's head, it's this like, the futuristic like Space Needle. It's really open and airy, where like the teenage boy's head, he has like the skate ramps and amps. The dad's head is like really militarized, which I thought was an interesting part of gender that we can come back to. But like everybody else's, it's just the console and then a backdrop that's like themed. So I guess that scene is the most like practical reason that Riley's was different. Yeah, because she's the main character, but everyone else's was the same because you need to just like in a snap understand like some amount of characterization from like the setting and the character design.
I want to find this tweet about Inside Out 2, which I don't want to talk too much about because obviously this is an Inside Out episode and we will eventually cover Inside Out 2, but it was a tweet that really summed up part of my thoughts of this film anyway. I found it. Zach Sellerberg on Twitter said, Twitter guy, they already showed us that everyone in the world has those 5 emotions, even adults. So, are these new emotions temporary? Is Riley the only one to get them? Or is this a terrible retcon that's going to ruin everything? And then, target audience. Joy is my favorite. She's yellow and she's nice. But let me tell you, I am the first guy. I do not understand the whole premise of the sequel being that there are new emotions when we see teenagers in this one without them. And I know the point is, because this is a hook. This is a hook that will get people in. Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of part of me
Don,
being
I
like,
see
you have
hand.
to.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm trying. My like camera has a little like hand thing to make it stop moving. So I find that annoying.
Oh, I thought you were raising your hand.
No.
Oh my gosh,
sorry.
is it doing that automatically?
Yeah. I got my work to pay for it, baller.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
And if the hand things work, you can also like zoom using the hand stuff. And then, sorry, this is so boring for your audience, but you can also like go down and do like a whiteboard mode. It's dope. It's really cool. If they, I'm not going to say the name though, because they're not sponsoring your podcast, and they do sponsor. So I'm going to zip my lips till the bucks come in.
Yeah, good call.
Thank you very much.
I always like that when people would like very, a person on YouTube with like 100 followers will like blur the logo of, Jif peanut butter. And it's like, yeah, dude, you got to protect that sponsorship bucks. Their marketing director is going to reach out to you tomorrow so that you represent Morton Salt.
But okay, Mark, sorry, what were you saying? Because I was distracted by Don raising his hand.
No,
sorry.
I'm sorry. I enjoyed the idea of like not advertising Morton Salt. But anyway,
that should be the title of the episode. Not sponsored by Morton Salt.
But I'm sorry. But anyway, I think that's part of like buying into the rules of the film is that there are not actual rules in this world. I think that is a thing about Pete Docter movies, is that if you kind of stop expecting the world to behave in some way that like is logically consistent or whatever, I think then you will be better able to engage with the plot and the ideas. Like,
I definitely think. Sorry, I thought you were done. Sorry.
Well, no. I mean, that's basically my statement.
I definitely think, on a personal note, is that this watch for me is finally the time it wavered from a 5-star movie to a 4.5, because, people always this has been the criticism of this movie since it came out, and Mark kind of expressed it, but it's just, as metaphor, some of the stuff makes no sense in this movie. It's kind of because what matters obviously is what's in the real world, like, right? That's what actually matters. Joy's arc is metaphor. We don't necessarily need to see Joy learn the purpose of sadness. The point is that it's teaching the audience the purpose of sadness and Riley the purpose of sadness. Ergo, the stuff in the memory dump where she realized it, that's fantastic. That's great. But do we need things like... I'm trying to remember what particularly really, like, I was just like, what is this even supposed to represent? I think it was like Joy trying to get in, like, the tube and pushing sadness out. Or no, I don't even think it was that. It was something else. It's like, all this stuff that's going on in her head is like, I don't fully get it. Entirely. I don't get what it's supposed to represent as like, I remember what I was thinking of. It's like when she is, like when they're on the train of thought about to finally get up there, and then whatever islands, the Honesty Island falls, and the train of thought just gets thrown against the wall, knocking over tons of memories. I'm like, okay, so like, is she forgetting a ton of shit right now? Is Riley just losing memories? Is she just not thinking at all? Like, and I know what you're saying, Mark, you're like, the rules never really matter in a Pete Docter movie, but in this sense, it does set up, these are the rules. The train of thought runs when Riley is thinking. Okay, so is it telling me she's not thinking anymore? If so, how later when they stop it, she's not thinking. She has no thoughts right now. The train of thought has been derailed. And it's just, at that point, I was just like, okay, I see why this movie collapses for some people. Because even though I still enjoy it all and still really like, as I said, it's like, it goes from a 5-star movie to a 4.5 out of 5 movie to me. Like, I get why it drives people insane thinking about this movie when that happened.
But you can get there. That's kind of what was illuminating for me, is that, oh, well, sadness suddenly trying to touch all of the memories is actually what would happen when someone moves away from their old place, and suddenly all of those do become tinged with sadness. And there is this internal emotional struggle to even, like, feel sad when you're a little kid. I think that's, like, a big part, like, it's even when we were talking about Ghibli films last week, it's like you see this more mature anime style or whatever we said, and it's like when you're a little kid, you can be turned off a little bit because it's like, oh, well, I don't want something that's like dark. I want like goofy cartoon characters, like in Toy Story 2, the VHS that I'm watching and seeing the Kiki's Delivery Service trailers, you know? So I think that actually isn't a real place, but you do have to rewire your brain. Like you said, unless you just click with it, you have to like rewire your brain to see everything as like, all right, what I'm seeing right now is not actually what is happening. Even in the real world, these are not the most expressive characters, so I have to like do mental work to figure out what is going on here.
I'm about to trash a movie I really like, because I do really like this movie, okay? But I do think it requires a lot of buy-in in a sense that even like movies like WALL-E and Up don't. Because the fact is that these characters are not characters. They exist solely in metaphor, really. So it's hard to reconcile the idea of, say, like what you're saying. It makes sense that sadness would tinge memories, old memories. Okay, but in the film, the character of sadness has this undying, like, compulsion to touch everything that she's not supposed to touch. In which case, it's like, this is kind of frustrating because I don't understand why this character is doing it. But the thing is, you need to remember, these aren't characters, they are metaphor for Riley. Which is something that can be kind of hard to do at points when you're watching. Which makes, in a way, Joy very sympathetic, because she is a character who also does not understand why these characters are doing this to her. But also, it's frustrating too, because you know, as soon as like the mom says, just be happy for us, you're like, oh shit, like that's what this movie's about. Trying to force your child to be happy just by making a one-off comment and not realizing the damage that can do interiorly. And I say all that getting it out of the way because I too really love this movie. I do think it really was a return to form for Pixar, even if it didn't pan out that like their movies were consistently returned to form afterwards. I think this is a better film than Up, definitely. I think this is on the level of Monsters, Inc. for Pete Docter's films. But I think it is a film that requires so much buy-in that it can be frustrating at points. And you have to be very, very paying attention to it in a way that it sounds weird, because I think if you're a child, this movie makes total sense, right? Like, it makes complete sense, this movie. But I think as an adult, you really have to pay attention to it, because otherwise you're going to be caught up in stuff that feels like the movie doesn't want you to get caught up in. I think it's a great movie.
As I was falling asleep, the like phrase that came to my mind. I don't know if you ever heard it, but how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? It's like an old rhetorical thing about like overly specific religious debates and like philosophizing or whatever. But it kind of just has turned into, like a pointlessly specific argument. Because like, can the emotions get injured? It kind of they kind of have a pain response, but like not really. And she falls like this great like height, but like this is a children's cartoon. Like not a lot of the rules seem to make sense. Like how heavy are my immediate reaction when I saw this? I know it's supposed to be metaphor, but I guess it was like obviously this has to be metaphor because they clearly have MRIs in this world. This is actually what the inside of these people's brain. In Monsters Inc., the doors do, like open to a different portal, right? So if we get like engaged that the world is completely different from ours, has different rules, I was like, well, they gotta have MRIs because they have like other advanced like technology. So yeah, I guess this does have to be metaphorical. There's no chance for this to be literal. But yeah.
Oh, you mean because they would be able to see the little people with the MRI machine?
Exactly. Take an MRI and see, the space needle in your head and all that stuff. Like,
I got you.
I'm just throwing it out there. Like, for a children's movie, isn't that preposterous that they would make the inside of your head hollow?
Maybe Danny will appreciate this, but when you said they must have MRI machines, I was like, because his mom's alive.
That's a callback joke to something I think we said, and maybe it was last week's episode or the week before. We talked about the line in Interstellar that cracks me up every time, where he talks about MRIs.
It's a long quote. We can like return to it, but
we said it recently, so on the podcast. So I can't waste the time to say it again. But all that, like, I feel like that's all the table setting of like this movie's metaphor and like what it's about. Then now we can talk about the film. Now, you know what I mean? Like the tangible qualities of the film. One thought I had during this rewatch, I think it's a thought I've always had about this movie, is that, there's one thought I'll hold on to, but there are two awards I think this movie should have been nominated for that it was never nominated for in, like, various things. One of them I'll table for a bit, but the first one I want to talk about is, like, if we were allowed to nominate animated films for Best Ensemble, I think this is clearly, like, one of the greatest ensembles ever, like, assembled in an animated movie. Everyone fits their character perfectly. It is impossible to say what, like, it'd be like, oh, Richard Kind is so great in this movie. Oh yes, but Bill Hader as Fear, great. Mindy Kaning's not in a lot, but like, you cannot single out someone in this movie. Everyone in this movie is so fantastic. I remember because that box office board that I was telling we went to Barbenheimer with, we have like awards every year, and we had like a I should look this up really quickly. We had a voiceover category. Let me look this up. And I want to know what was nominated. I know Phyllis Smith ended up winning. But I'm just trying to remember who were I think we nominated Louis Black. I think the entire category is basically nominees from Inside Out, basically.
While you look that up, just to fill the air, yes, very stacked voice cast. And I wanted to point out, they also had Paula Poundstone and Peter Sagal. And any of the listeners also listen to NPR, the host and very common guest on NPR's hit radio show, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. So I guess they are both in like comedy, but I don't know if the casting director was like, man, I love this NPR radio show. I got to give them a spot in my movie. I thought that was funny. Oh, and then also
the Muppets
not beating the white
up.
People movie allegations.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, go on.
Well, the Muppets show up.
Says
too,
a lot about
so.
me. Like, oh yeah, wow, those people from NPR. and one last fun voice credit: the guy who did the Brazilian helicopter pilot. He's in a huge amount of other stuff, but he also did the Taco Bell Chihuahua. So back to Danny after those two fun cameos.
All right, so I found that it had 4 nominations, so now I'm gonna go crazy trying to find out what the other film nominated was, because now I'm just like, who was it? Who else did we nominate? But the 4 we nominated for Inside Out were Louis Black, Richard Kind, Amy Poehler, and Phyllis Smith. And Phyllis Smith won. Now I'm just gonna quickly see what the other nom was, because I'm like, who was the one that snuck? Oh, Jennifer Jason Leigh from Anomalisa was the 5th nomination there. So I was just curious who snuck in from another movie.
What a good year.
Yeah. What?
What a good year that Anomalisa came out that same year, you know?
Yeah, I think 2015 was just the other animated films that year we nominated were Shaun the Sheep, The Good Dinosaur, and When Marnie Was There. So I think it really was Inside Out and Anomalisa's year, really, you know?
Yeah. Not to make the same point in a different context, but I think that the voice acting is so good, it's a little bit jarring for me, because I think that Amy Poehler is doing a lot of work vocally that the model of Joy is not doing, and that kind of throws me a little bit. I even think that on like rewatching too. I think that something about the acting in this movie, like the animated acting, doesn't exactly work for me, but the voices are incredible. I think that Amy Poehler she's so full of doubt, and she is full of anxiety all the time, and like the character of Joy never really expresses that.
Sure, but I do think, though, on the counterpoint of that, even though yes, I think, and we'll talk about this when we get to it, I think the apex of animation, period, in America right now, American CGI character animation, is Coco. Because the character models in Coco are constantly doing the work, and it never feels like they're overacting. Whereas here, I feel like Riley, I think the humans are so well acted, but then the emotions are very stylized, very kind of puppet-like, which is endearing. But yes, I would agree that it's kind of, at points, Joy kind of comes into also, I think Joy, the face doesn't do much, and so sometimes she's just does like that Disney style of acting where she's waving her hands all over the place, and that doesn't feel like it's matching what Amy Poehler's doing necessarily. I do think, I think if we have to pick a fave, I think my forum chose right. I think Phyllis Smith in here is kind of a revelation, considering what we know her from as just that woman from The Office who's kind of sad. She's doing a lot of work here, but I also think this is like Richard Kind's like role of a lifetime in a lot of ways too. Yeah. Again, it's a movie where it's like you talk about any specific person, you're like, yeah, but then there's this person too. And I think the biggest thing that turns me off from the sequel, and I've said this before, isn't really my joke I said about like, you know, like these emotions, that makes no sense for the world. It's the idea that Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling are replaceable. Because I think even their small roles in this, I think the funniest scene in this movie is when Fear's watching the dreams. That scene cracks me up so much every time. Part of it is like Fear's like reactions. It is also the dream, but just Fear like being like, boo, pick a plot line and stuff like that. And it's just perfectly voiced by Bill Hader. And we're big fans of Barry on this show. I don't know if Don watches Barry, but me and Mark are pretty big fans of Barry. Bit mixed on the final season, but who isn't?
But I'm not mixed on the final season.
Okay, well then you're the only person I know who's mixed or not mixed or negative on the final season, because everyone else I know kind of like, well,
I'm mixed in the way that you can be like critical about good art, but I think that like the finale of Barry is fantastic. So Nah, man, I'm right.
No, you're not.
Everyone else is wrong.
That's right.
Nah. Barry season 4, the more and more I think about it, was a big wet fart. But it's okay because we had Succession season 4 at the same time. So.
Well, anyway.
Bill Hader, phenomenal. Lois Black, phenomenal. Mindy Kaling, phenomenal. Diane Lane, Kyle MacLachlan, phenomenal. The girl who plays Riley, Caitlin Diaz, phenomenal. There we go. I said the whole cast. There we go. Mm-hmm. But
yeah,
I also think, I don't know. It's just, you know, it's a really. I want to talk a bit more because I said it quickly and Don agreed, but then I kind of just moved on to talk about more people. Because I do think he deserves special shout out because he was not in the marketing for the film at all, and that's Richard Kind as Bing Bong. And Bing Bong is kind of the secret sauce here that makes the whole thing work regardless, because Bing Bong is not an emotion. He is a character that's allowed to just be a character.
Mm-hmm.
I instinctively did the head tilt and Bing Bong, and I'm only saying that out loud because I realized that I did in fact slightly breathe during that. So if you very softly heard Bing Bong in the audio, that was me forgetting how live recording works. I love.
Who's your friend who likes to play Bing Bong, Bing Bong?
Yeah, I love, like, so good. Again, the voice and voice acting for Bing Bong, like,
the design too.
Unbelievable.
The design of Bing Bong is beautiful.
Yes, and okay, so I forgot my real point, but again, I'm going to put a stake in the ground in case we're going to come back to it. When we talk about technical aspects, one of the things I was really noticed was like really great use of light throughout the movie, and like very subtle uses of light. And
I
one
love
of them,
how joy just radiates.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah. Not to be the guy on a podcast who just reads the Wikipedia page, but apparently that like the radiance around joy was like a massive technical hurdle, which I think is really interesting because I wouldn't have expected that. But a quick thing with the Bing Bong and light is he has those like purple accents, especially in his like big fluffy cat tail. But when he's sad and sadness comforts him, and we're like, you know, midway through our journey of discovering sadness is important, but sadness comforts him, he cries his candy, and the like tertiary lighting or whatever on him shifts from purple to a blue. So now he has blue accents on his tail and blue accents on part of his fur instead of just purple. And I thought that was like a really skillful way, unless my TV was poorly calibrated, but I thought that was like a really skillful way of like using the medium and like getting that characterization, that interaction with sadness across.
I do appreciate the different little details, like on the train of thought, it has the names of all the islands on it and stuff like that. Like the world has consistency, within itself. I don't know. I felt like Bing Bong is another one of those things I kind of like bounced off of, because I feel like I had a bunch of imaginary friends, and it just, I don't know. There's so much in this movie seems like it's hard to know if this really came from a real person, because it seems kind of like an adult's idea of what a kid's like little imaginary friend would be. But I think that, like obviously in real life, little kids are darker than they are sometimes portrayed. But I don't know. I don't even remember if I had a bunch of, I'm sure I had like a few imaginary people that I played with sometime, but I don't even think I had like an imaginary friend.
And definitely not one as creative as Bing Bong. Yeah, that like varies. I can't imagine myself or really anybody a cat, cotton candy, dolphin monster. Like having an imaginary friend, and I did like the like that concept of imagination and the lava and everything, because that is very true, or like very relatable. But yeah, the Bing Bong was like kind of out there, but I think it kind of works because it is supposed to be for children, I guess. So it really has to get the point across that like, look at this silly imaginary friend. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, to the movie's credit, it does cut a dog in half. So
that's the best
kind of
scene of the movie.
Me.
That's what I was saying. That's the best part.
Yeah,
because
I didn't forget about that. And then when they showed his like a ham slice for the middle of the dog, I was like, wow, okay, cool.
Wait, I was gonna say something about Bing Bong that I meant to say, which is first off, my imaginary friend was Kaka, Chihuahua, very cool dog. Second,
you named it after like a word for shit.
I didn't know that, Mark. I was young. One thing people forget about this movie, because this is a movie that has become very much a part of the pop culture lexicon in a way that makes it so you forget the build up to this movie, which is the first time I watched this movie. We were coming off of Wreck-It Ralph. We were coming off of Big Hero 6. We were coming off of Frozen. And even though Pixar hadn't done it, a big trend right now in animated film was twist villains. And so when this character shows up in the middle of this movie, it's not in the marketing at all, and he goes,
oh yeah, all I want to do is make sure Riley remembers me. My gut instinct is like, oh, okay, so this is the bad guy. This is the guy who's gonna mess everything up because he wants to be remembered. And so then when the ending happens where he's like, Riley means so much to me that I will give myself up for her in order so she can feel joy again, that hits so... I mean, it still hits really hard. But, like, that is not where you expect the storyline to go with Bing Bong when you first meet him. Because also he does that suspicious thing where it's like, oh, let's go into this thing that says danger, you know? There's this whole thing where it's like, there's all these things that I think isn't actually intentional, but it's like, when you go in thinking like, this guy's gonna be the twist villain. There's all this stuff that happens when you're like, of course he's gonna be the villain. And then it's like, no, he is actually the sacrificial lamb here to show the meeting, like, not the meeting, but the transition of adulthood, childhood to adulthood. So...
Homer Simpson bit when he spelled danger, he goes, yeah, shortcut. I was like, that is a classic bit for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that it is kind of justified that he can be a little bit chaotic in a way that would make him seem like the movie's main villain, because he represents a time in Riley's life where she had no concept of danger. Mm-hmm. So he, like, he actually is dangerous in some ways, and he dies by sacrificing himself and protecting someone else. And that was never the way he worked before. Like, he always was not selfish, but it's not like he had a conception of things outside of himself or playing around with Riley. This imaginary character cannot exist anymore once it feels responsible for someone else and caring, like, in a self-sacrificing way. And this is just like, here's my thought about Bing Bong is, like, as soon as you see him, I think he's going to die. And like, he just has those
the movie's
vibes.
Clearly about growing up, and here's the imaginary friend who's fading from all the memories. What's gonna happen to him?
That's kind of my, like, you know, it's all a metaphor. You can make everything work, when really my actual lived experience watching the film is, oh, this guy's gonna, like, teach us something and then die on the Death Star or something like that. And I felt that way about when sadness starts. Like, the first time that sadness touches one of the memories, and then joy is like, don't touch the memory, sadness. I'm like, all right, so that's going to be the end of the movie. It's part of the reason I kind of bounce off of it, is because it's just, like, it seems so clear what is going to happen. And all of the steps to get there are... I mean, like, obviously not necessary. Every time I talk as though I am someone who cares about the rules of the world, because I do. And I always talk myself out of my initial argument, which was that we just need to let Pete Docter tell us his story in the way that he wants to. But it's hard for me to do that. So, anyway.
I will say that I think the part that leaves me behind the most, and I think it's only like 10-ish minutes, but... Joy and Sadness get exiled, but before they get Bing Bong, they just, like, walk around and complain to each other for a while, and I pick boring. I don't get any characterization out of it, and I don't know, it's because I know they're not characters or whatever, but, like, just a waste of time. And then finally they meet Bing Bong, and it's like, okay, we can get have some fun again. But yeah, I'll say that there is that, like, a doldrum for me. So I see what you mean of you can get detached quite easily.
There was one thing that just popped in my head too, where it's like, the rules of this world make no sense, which is I can say it and just move on, because it's like, this is what I'm saying, went along with, like, that train of thought thing where it's like, they end up in the memory dump and things are fading away so quickly. But don't worry, the wagon that was dumped in here 6 hours ago is still here.
Oh.
You know, it's all stuff where it's, like, very nitpicky and it's silly because it's all a metaphor anyway. So it's like, why am I doing this? You know?
Well, I don't mind the wagon either, because that's one of those things where it's like, well, you want to see them use the wagon, right? Like, that's one of the few things that has this element of spectacle in the movie that you're like, oh, wouldn't that be cool, you know, if they used the wagon. It's not like, I don't know what I'm saying, but it's, yeah, I don't mind that the wagon sticks around. That's not something that bugs me.
I was just going to say, yeah, I get the danger is inconsistent down there, because there's the massive piles of memories, and some at the top are evaporating, but there's still many below them. So, like, even though they're in the gone forever zone, they still don't leave forever for an indeterminate amount of time. And then, yeah, Bing Bong starts fading immediately. His wagon's fine. But what I was looking for, again, with, like, Joy and her, like, glow, is Joy is not affected at all. So there's, like, I guess there's a danger that she needs to get back to help Riley, but can emotions be forgotten? Like, how would that work, that Joy would disappear? And, like...
As we know, at the end of this film, we see that everyone has those core 5 emotions. And in Inside Out 2, we're going to meet new emotions. So perhaps that is the end of Inside Out 2, is that Joy is going to make it so Riley forgets puberty.
She's like 300
new emotions in the memory tub.
Anxiety into the memory hole from the Space Needle.
She's like, this is what therapy does! Punches anxiety.
Exactly.
Well, that's something that
terrible lessons to teach children. Don't worry, you can just forget about being anxious. That's not gonna happen.
If you still have it as an adult, it's because you're broken. Pixar.
But I think that's something that is kind of true about the movie, is that when she's running away from home, she's not expressing sadness. Like, when you're doing something that is, like, dangerous to yourself, you can be in this state of, not like non-feeling, I just don't know if it's a feeling that would be represented by these Pixar feelings, you know? But you have this kind of tunnel vision and this, like, drive to do something dangerous or bad for yourself or whatever. And so I think there is some truth in that when she meets back up with her parents, that's when sadness can resurface, and that's part of why expressing sadness is important, because then, you know, you can, like, when you allow yourself to feel emotions and open up to your parents or whoever, that's when you can, like, start to heal and be a whole person, and then like take a step back and look at your situation and be like, oh no, I shouldn't, like, get on this bus to nowhere, you know?
I mean, that makes sense to me. It feels like you're kind of almost describing, like, the lesson of the movie of you gotta let in. I thought the depression, I guess it could have been more dramatic, but it made sense to me, the numbness, that feeling that you were saying of, like, non-feeling.
Yeah,
just
numbness,
numb.
that's the word. Yeah.
And that also goes back to how this story is only possible because of, like, her good background or whatever, but, like, what's an alternate movie here where she's from, like, a troubled home, her parents don't notice or care that she's gone, and now she's just, like, numb. And, you know, like, that...
Well, that's what happens, though. She begins to become numb at the end of the movie, you know?
Yes, but then she has the reunite, and then embraces the sad, you know, does that growing up, embraces sadness, but... Yeah, that, like, this movie, but for people with like other experiences, what is it like if you're numb like that for years or something? You know, how does Inside Out handle, like, Zoloft or whatever? Does that slap sadness back awake, and then you know, the numbness starts to go away? That was something
I almost mentioned earlier, which is, to me, the entire, like, idea. It's not that the idea that they have for Inside Out 2, but the fact that we're getting Inside Out 2 is so funny to me. Because I remember, like, as soon as this movie came out, for some, like, I think this was, like, YouTube's always been a thing, but I remember immediately being on YouTube and seeing so many, like, obviously fake things, like, Inside Out 2 plotline, and it's, like, Riley as an adult, and it's like, what is going, like, trailer released for Inside Out 2, and so the idea of there being an Inside Out 2 coming out, and having the exact same, like, fake logo that all those fake ones had, is just very, like, very funny to me. Because I feel like, yeah, I think what's interesting about the end of the movie, too, is like, a bad idea causes depression is basically the implication, I feel like. It's like, the idea is bad that they plug in, and that causes the entire thing to go haywire. But I think that in and of itself is thing. I don't know. I actually did have like a serious conversation to have on this, but I'm starting to get worried about my battery on my computer because I don't know what's going on with it.
Well, we can get the serious conversation, and I keep like trying. We keep kind of going off to like, let's talk about the technical aspects of this movie. For me, it always comes back to the concept. I don't know. I'm not getting any. I don't get a lot of ground out of like talking about the technical aspects, because if you start to talk about things like characterization, then it quickly becomes like, well, what characterization? And like the direction. Oh yeah, we know where everything is all the time. And the movie like really drills it into your fucking head, you know, how like core memories work and that kind of thing. In a way that makes me tune out of the movie. But that's what I'm saying is like, if we talk about all like the technical stuff and not about, you know, whatever thoughts we might have, I don't know, I start to get negative.
Well, I have phenomenal news. I got my charger to work, which means I'm now completely locked in and engaged with this conversation. But all right, so there's a lot of things I want to talk about emotionally with this film. One of them is like a big depression moment that I will get to at some point, but don't want to start with. But one is, I think there's a very deep sorrow to this movie that's left very unspoken, that always makes me feel very sad at the end of it, which is that, you know, you see all the islands at the end of the movie, and you know, you see Friendship Island's back, you see Family Island's back, but you know what I always notice isn't back is Goofball Island, which I think is a very great thing that's not commented on, because it's just like, that's just gone. She's too old to be, she's no longer, that's just not her anymore. And I think it's something where the movie never really dives into the parent's actual emotional state, but I have to imagine as a parent, that would be something very noticeable that your child has moved past. And I think that is a very remarkable thing that's left uncommented on. I think in a way, it being uncommented on just makes it even more sad. And it's something that always it doesn't make me cry or anything, but it gives me like a twinge of feeling at it.
And they're destroying Imagination Land, right?
Yes.
Like,
not only are they destroying it, but the things they're building there are stuff where it's like, it's a house of cards. It's like, okay, that's not really imaginative. It's just something older people try to do to like pass time, you know? It's not like anything particularly special. And of course, you know, this all comes back to like Bing Bong's dying too. It's like, It all this thing where it's like there's this big moment of change going on in Riley that would have happened anyway without the move, and the film is so focused on the move because that's what Riley is focused on, so that's fine. But it's also like a big, that's why to me like the plot of Inside Out 2 being like, this is about puberty, it's like I feel like Inside Out 1 is already about the death of childhood, that I don't necessarily think that we need to do a full out puberty thing. It's kind of like Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3, where it's like I like Toy Story 3, but is Toy Story 3 necessary? Because everything Toy Story 3 does is summed up by the line at the end of Toy Story 2, where Buzz is like where it's like, we'll be with him, or whoever says it, it's like, aren't you afraid that Andy's gonna grow up and move past us? Yeah, he will, but we'll be here for infinity and beyond. And like, that's what Toy Story 3 is dealing with it, but really nothing really goes beyond the line that was already set. And I feel like that's what Inside Out 2 is gonna be. But the thing I had in my mind that I actually was like very deep talk, I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about this. I've never talked about this on a show before. Maybe I have. Maybe I did talk about it in our early episodes. But I think about in this movie, this is the first thing that immediately stuck out to me on this watch. I don't think I've ever thought about before, is when Riley breaks down crying in her class and a core memory is made. And Joy intercepts it from becoming an island. And I think about, even though, you know, this all exists in metaphor, what happens if she doesn't? You know? What if that becomes a core part of Riley's personality? And I think that is something that, in a weird way, happened to me, in a very traumatic sense. Because I think that's not a core, I think that becomes a traumatic memory, in a way, that becomes a root part of you. And by Riley, by intercepting it, instead, her traumatic moments becomes the moment of catharsis with her parents at the end. Which means ultimately, by Joy intercepting, she helps Riley out a ton. But I think about, there's this moment that Dawn, I think you were actually there for, was a very traumatic moment in my life. And it was when I was, and it sounds very silly. It sounds very actually Inside Out. It sounds very first person problem. But you know, I've been talking to my therapist and people, and like how it's like you can have trauma that doesn't matter. You know, like it is fine to be traumatic and not be like, well, you know, other people are dealing with like bigger shit. That's fine. It's not like everyone is traumatized by something. But I remember my senior year of high school when I worked my ass off to do speech and debate, try to make it to the national stage, and then like I didn't make it by like one spot, and I just broke down crying on stage in front of like everyone. And like it was just, it's a moment that has stuck with me for years. It's a moment that I think sent me into a depression for the end of my senior year. And there was a lot of things that built up to that moment too. It wasn't just speech and debate. There was other dumb stuff with a girl that was very stupid of me and immature of me. But you know, it's something that I think irrevocably changed my life in a way that I don't even really ever think about. I think it made me a much more cautious person. It made me someone who feels like I need to prove my worth way more than I probably should. And I thought about that when I was watching this movie and Riley's breaking down in class in front of everyone. And that's going to be a core moment for her for the rest of her life. And I don't know. I don't think there's really much to do with that thing. And it's something where I think even talking about it now, I'm avoiding talking about specifics about it because it is still a very traumatic moment in my life. That sounds silly that it was traumatic that I didn't get to go to a national tournament, but it really is something where like it coincides with so many of my anxieties in a way of am I worth it enough and being told on a grand stage that no, you are not. And that's really what it comes down to, you know that. And it's something where this happened this happened 10 years ago, and I'm still feeling it in ways that even though I've processed it several times, worked through it several times, it's something that feels irrevocably part of me. And that's just something you got to deal with as something that's like a core memory, you know? But yeah. Anyway, what, Mark, were you going to say?
Well, were you, like, embarrassed in that moment, or was it something that, like,
No.
other people confronted you about later on?
I wasn't even embarrassed about crying in front of everyone. It was something where it's more like, I feel like it's something where it sounds funny that this happened like senior year of high school, but I don't know. It comes down to, I always think there's this line in The Heights where I'm going to butcher it because I don't have that movie memorized or play memorized. And it's really funny for me to like, as a white guy, repurpose this for my own senses and purposes because it's like that movie is about people in a much different socioeconomic area than I am. But it's like, you know, people tell you the world is like a place where hard work and perseverance. What?
Never mind, go on.
People tell you the world is like a world where like hard work and perseverance is what really matters, and everything comes to those who like wait and put in the effort, and it really isn't. It's all dependent on other people's opinions of you in a way, and if people don't like you, or if you fuck up in front of someone and that's it, then you're fucked. And I think it's something where, you know, I was a very privileged kid growing up. I was someone who got a part in every play because I was the only boy in our high school who wanted to do plays. So it was something where I never even had to worry about it. And here it was on a grand stage being told, you're not a good actor. You can't even... Because the thing was, Mark, I didn't even need to place first or second. I needed to get third place, and I got fourth place. And it's like, you couldn't even get fucking third place of people who are like the small Indiana district that you are in, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, well, shit. Like, what the fuck am I then? And it also didn't help that, like, again, this is all related to past trauma. I am not, it sounds weird, I'm not hung up on this, but it's something where it's like, I know this is something that affects my personality to this day. But it's like, the person who beat me was the girl I was having issues with, too. So it was like all caught up in this big thing where it was like, you already are having issues with someone here who just beat you, and you mentored and they beat you. And you feel no joy in this because it's all been caught up in this dumb emotional thing you let yourself be caught up in. And moreover, it is something where, in the grand scheme of things, it's being told that your brothers, that's really what it is too. It all comes in sibling rivalry too. It's like your brothers Tim had already qualified for nationals that year as a sophomore, and it's being told your brothers are great at this thing and you are not. You are the failure of your family because everyone else matters and is good enough and you aren't. Anyway, that's what came to my mind when Riley started crying and a core memory was formed, was this deep trauma of mine from 10 years ago that I feel like if we are to take the world of Inside Out, this probably made an island of mine that's like called Cautious Island or Protect Yourself Island, or more likely something where it's like, one thing I've been really working through recently as like a person is how often when I'm with friends who care about me, I still feel like I need to prove myself as like the funny guy, and I put on this persona, and I think it all comes back to that, you know, that thing where it's like, well, you bared yourself like dramatic, because it was dramatic, it was drama, it was like something where I really worked to like show my emotion through my work, and I was told, well, you didn't fucking do it well enough, and in response I was like, well, then I need to fucking amplify the weirder parts of me that make me prove that I'm worthwhile to have around. Anyway, this is our first really... Hi, Don. You're here for the first really big, like, diving into my trauma in a while, so... Yeah.
Yeah, this is, well, I don't know. I think these are fruitful episodes. We just haven't had one in a while. And now we're having one with a guest.
And Don was there. Don, I think, was there seeing me break down on stage. He probably doesn't remember it because it wasn't his trauma, and that's fine.
Yeah. Don, do you mind if I share a personal trauma story?
I'm in it. I'm so in it.
Okay, I don't want to go more than like, I don't want to go too much longer, but that reminds me of something, and then even something in Inside Out reminded me of this moment, and it's another reason that I bounce off the movie, because I'm like, this is not how this fucking happens. But I remember. And this is related, I think, in some ways to your story, Danny, but I'm wondering if it's illuminating or useful, or maybe not useful, but just like, I don't know, just another tale of something similar. But anyway, so like Riley's on a hockey team, right? And I played basketball in like grade school, and I didn't do it much beyond then. But there was one game where I remember like I kept fouling. And I was never really sure why I ever fouled in basketball, because I found out like doing basketball, like at a grade school level, even then, they're not actually going to like teach you basketball. They're going to just like train you in basketball, because I don't know, like they assume that everyone knows basketball. But I was just like, I'm just like fouling so much. And at some point I just like get so pissed off that I get like the foul call, and then I just like take the ball and then I slam it down on the court twice. And I think that was like twice was like the big thing. It was like, oh my gosh, he's mad. And I think, I don't know, I got like carded for that. But then I remember like afterwards, like driving home, because this was like an away game in a different town. But like my dad was like really pissed off about that. And I'm not hung up about this at all. I'm telling this story because I think that it's not something I'm hung up about, and I know it involves other people. But like my dad, who is not like an openly like very angry guy, was like very mad, and it was like, oh my gosh, this was like so embarrassing, and like I can't believe you did that. And once again, like, this was a fine reaction, because I think that all of that is true, but like part of the reason that I was like so frustrated in that moment is that like obviously one, partly like I don't know shit about what I'm doing, but then also like I was like super bullied on that team. It was a team that did not like to have me around. Like all of those guys were dicks to me. I always worry about telling these stories because I worry that I'm gonna like have some Liz Lemon moment someday where I'm like, oh, I was the asshole in all of my past memories when I thought other people were mean to me. But I'm just saying I had that moment of like public humiliation, but like all of my my grief about that actually came out of like other people being mean to me and being like, oh, you don't know what you're doing, and like, God, why don't you, like, why are you fucking here? And then my dad was annoyed with me, and then the answers to like, why are you fucking here, is that like years later I went back to my grade school just because I was like in town visiting, and my the people that knew me at that time like didn't ask me about like, oh, now you're like doing theater, which is a thing that you did then. And I was like, but it was like, oh, I remember you because you were on the basketball team. Like this was a real thing because people like valued sports, and not the thing that I do now. And people just hated me because I was like not into basketball. I have so many I have other like memories that stay with me of people actually teaching me how to do things in basketball, like taking me aside and being like, okay, here's what you're doing wrong. Like that's so meaningful to me because that wasn't part of my experience. But I only say that to say that like part of the reason I bounced off this movie and part of I think a lot of these experiences are like other people can be really awful, you know? And especially you mentioned like Goofball Island. Like you get rid of Goofball Island because like any emotions you express become ammunition for people that want to hurt you, you know? Like that seems so clear to me. You have a very healthy like goofball instinct. I think that's like a good part of you. I don't mind. I don't like that going away is just like, of course that would go away because you meet more and more awful people until you're out on your own, and then you can like choose your found family or whatever.
If I may cut in, sorry Don, I just need to respond to something Mark said, which is not any of that stuff he just said. There was stuff I wanted to respond to like 4 minutes ago, and it's just that I think the reason why I'm always apprehensive of delving into what I delved into is because I know now, and I knew at the time, how I was behaving and acting towards this girl that's involved in the story was wrong. I felt guilt at the time at how I was behaving and treating her mentally, and I feel bad now. But I also recognize now that, of course, I was a teenager, so it's like, that doesn't absolve me of anything, but it's also like, well, you had hormones raging through you. But that's why I'm apprehensive of telling the story, because I am pretty aware that most of the stuff in that story, I want to say it's about, and I say it's about on this podcast, it is partially about what I said, like within the In the Heights quote, but it also is about my own mistakes within my emerging sexuality at the time. That I don't really want to get into, of course, on the podcast, because that's way too personal. It involves a girl that will never be able to say her side of the story, so I don't want to bring that up. But it's something where it becomes something where I did have a big support group around me afterwards. They're like, Danny, don't worry, we still love you, and none of it meant shit, because the girl I was into at the time was, you know, part of my emerging sexuality, and she was tied into this whole story too. And it's just something where it's like, yeah, I can never tell the full story on a podcast because she would never be able to defend herself, and my side of the story is inherently biased and nicer to myself when it shouldn't be. But it's also something where, well, then Danny, you're just beating yourself up over something that happened 10 years ago too. But it's something where I want to make it clear that, yeah, your story is like, yeah, other people were being really shitty to me. I'm like, I think the other person who was shitty to me in this story was completely right to be shitty to me. Because I was being really awful and toxic to her in a way that I can't even get into on mic. Or even, like, probably can't even get to with my therapist if I wanted to, because it's like, this was 10 years ago. I don't even remember what I was thinking, you know? So...
I'm going to keep it real. You should probably get into it with your therapist, though. Those are usually productive moments when you're like... You can usually test the waters with your therapists. That's kind of what they're there for, you know?
Sure. But
better than
I
a
feel like it
bartender.
needs to come up organically. Yeah, true. But Don, you're a guest on this episode.
Yeah.
Don, it's time for your traumatic story.
Well, you don't need to give a traumatic story, but I'll let you guide the conversation because I know we are going long. I have at least 2 other things I want to talk about with this movie. 3 other things I want to talk about with this movie. So
I'm also down for going long as well. Wouldn't mind a water refill, but I'll survive without. And I guess we'll just leave that in. So to all the listeners out there, I'm a little parched. I hope you have a nice glass of water.
Do you want to get a water? Do you want to get a water refill? And I'm just gonna respond to something that Danny said real quick, but it's just kind of a statement because I just want to Well, I guess we can take a quick pause for water. I just wanted to say, I hope that you see why I brought that up. Where I'm I feel like sometimes stories and this movie too ignore that other people are out there. That's why this movie is partly frustrating to me because I think it greatly ignores the actions of other people. We just don't get to see a lot of Riley interacting with her parents in a way that's not positive or cartoonishly dampened, shut up. What is this, a real problem? You guys don't fucking slap each other around and burn each other with hot pokers and shit like that. And again, this is me why isn't this movie Train Spotting, right? But I don't know. I even something I think Lady Bird, everyone would agree. Not everyone, but a lot of people I say is wow, Lady Bird is such a great representation of my experience, even though I'm not a girl who went to a Catholic school, that's what I was really missing from this movie is the actual feeling of it being a real thing that could happen to real people. It all just seems so emotionally false.
That I'm gonna have to. I very strongly disagree with you with the movie not showing the impact of external people. So probably just missing your point. But
no. I want to hear it
because most, and again going back to the material conditions, it's not just the money, but I think all of her core memories were with other people. And again, I think you make a fair point of it only shows positive interactions with other people, right? Maybe in the puberty one, we'll see some more negative interactions and how that's handled. But this is
you kind of get a hint towards someone else at the end. I feel in the credits when we see the cool girl being insecure about herself, but that's not Riley.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, I loved that scene. I was holy shit, someone's complicated.
Yes, yeah, I think I see you have a valid point in that the movie's sickly sweet, and that's fair. But her memory of hockey, right, was her parents picking her up. Her memory of family was and the goofiness was because of her parents' positive reactions. The Friendship Island was a good time with her friend. And I think it's all fair to say, very simple examples, it's all positive. But then again, going to why is this movie Train Spotting? Okay, they played hockey, she fell, and her parents were and that was actually, we talk about the face acting of the humans being so much better. The acting of the little baby
that
one.
That is the scene. Oh, sorry.
Did such a good job of just how kids, they hurt. And they're about to cry, but they look at their parents. And then Riley's parents were hey, great job, and picked her up. And then, bam, turned right into a smile, which I thought was a great little piece of acting because that is what every little kid does. But a lot of her memories were formed by how other people treated her. And, maybe we'll see that in this puberty one of, she has a horrible interaction with a friend, and now she has an anger memory because of that or something. But I don't know. If anything, and maybe that's where we can go next or what. But I thought it was interesting that, from my perspective, Riley has no agency. It seemed like everything was being driven by the emotions or some background processes, the brain nerds always sending up the gum just for fun. So there was that sub layer of autonomic processes. But
can I just say something really quick as a side tangent, very quickly?
Yeah.
Triple Dent Gun song is not that catchy.
No, yeah.
The Bing Bong song is way catchier, as we were saying earlier, but the Triple Dent Gun song, they really need to come up with like a better jingle. I'm sure they could have come up with something more catchy than what they came up with. You know?
Completely agree. Or got a little contractor or something. But yeah, I felt that Riley, the human, had very little agency, and I thought that was like a very interesting way to portray the mind. That it's just things that happen to her and the environment around her, and then how these sort of like inbuilt characteristics of her respond to it.
I think a part of that, though, just inherently comes with the problem of the metaphor, which I know we've talked into a lot here, but the fact is that the idea, this is in air quotes, I know we're a podcast, I'm doing air quotes, no one can see it, the idea of running away comes from anger. But really what we see are these ideas I don't think they're supposed to come from the emotions. The emotions can put them into action, but it's something that Riley is already thinking about. Well, maybe I could run away, type of thing. And then when they lock it in, that's the emotion deciding, like, yes, we're going to try that idea. Yes, Mark?
I want to do a pause because we have not run this long in a while. So let's do a 1 minute water piss break and then pick it up.
I don't
right
need to go,
up.
so you guys can go, but I'll just
okay.
Stay right
Quick as a flash.
Okay.
Triple Dent Gun will make you smile. Triple Dent Gun, it lasts for a while. Triple Dent Gun, it's in the kisser, the bit, the bad. See, I don't even remember the word. It's not that catchy. Mark, you can keep this in the episode.
I wanted to hear if, Don, you had something on your brain besides rightfully telling me that I had missed certain parts of the movie. Because I know you were responding to that, but I wondered if you had anything that you wanted to share about like personal stuff as well, which you don't have to.
No, I'm all set. So not gonna take that opportunity, but
all good.
No, that's all fine. But then it's so Daniel, what are you saying?
All right, I have 3 things I want to talk about this movie. 2 of them are technical, but one of them I just want to mention the first one I mentioned isn't really technical, which is we talk about the Pixar Epiphany scene. Which is actually that actually comes from Soul. Like Soul literally labels its Epiphany scene on the soundtrack as Epiphany. And I think this is one of Pixar's finest Epiphany scenes. I think the rewinding of the memory to sadness does such a great job of showing it through silence. It's not even their facials, it's just how the characters move in the hockey memory. And Don briefly mentioned this, but I wanted to give it credit because I think her looking up in the sky and it being so blue and then the parents coming in and just transitioning to yellow is such a beautiful way of expressing how that works. And then, of course, at the end when they show the complicated memories that come from the catharsis of her seeing her parents, which also always makes me cry with this movie, that's just so powerful to me. And that's another reason why the whole premise of the sequel being like, there's also other emotions, gets me really frustrated, because I think the idea of emotional maturity is realizing not everything is cut and dry emotions is good. And the idea that the sequel is like, no, actually there are more emotions in these core 5 feel like a betrayal of that ending. But who knows? I haven't seen the movie yet.
Wait, before you go to point 2, I do, just to drive the point home, that is exactly what I was talking about, the sadness to joy one, where she was sad and then her parents came in, the hockey team came in, like she didn't feel happy, or like she didn't choose to feel joy, instead like this external force. And I don't know, like just an interesting through line through the movie of how much of your personality is, that's so funny that you had the exact opposite thing. How much of your personality is driven by what the world hands you, what the world does to you, and how other people interact. But that it only turned to joy because other people came to join her. She didn't like have an inner strength to turn it into joy.
Other people just tend to make me sad. I don't know.
Well, yeah. I think
I do just get a lot of joy out of being alone. So I think that's part of it. That part of it is like, oh, that's not my story.
I think another thing with this is, another thing that popped in my head when I was watching this movie this time, is Pixar, a lot of their films are, this is the same point by the way, this isn't my technical point. Pixar movies, we all talk, a lot of them are about parenthood, and in a way the emotions are parents in this movie, and they're also very childlike parents because they have the same emotional intelligence. It's funny to be like, these emotions have emotional intelligence, but they do have the same emotional intelligence as Riley does. But one thing that popped in my head is actually a line from Finding Nemo, which is when Dory's talking to Marlin, when it's like, you can't ever let, I looked up the exact quote, Dory goes, you can't never let anything happen to him, then nothing would ever happen to him. And I think that's kind of like the core of like what Joy is doing in this film, where it's like, she must always feel joy. And that's what Riley feels from her mother telling her that, like, be happy. And the fact is that you gotta feel sad. You gotta be angry. You gotta be, like, in the movie, outright tells you gotta be angry, you gotta be disgusted, you gotta be fearful at the very beginning of the movie. Like, Joy completely understands why those other emotions are necessary. She does not understand why sadness is necessary. And sadness is necessary because you cannot have joy without sadness, and you cannot have sadness without joy. You need that juxtaposition. They are so closely related. And of course, this is something I remember reading at the time as part of the character design, which is why Joy has the same color hair that is sadness. Because you must have both. Because you can't be joyful without being sad. And you can't, yeah. I don't know, I think it all comes back to, like, parenting, as always with Pixar, too. Which I think is also, in a way, the secret to their success is that parents are getting lessons from their movies, too. So, yeah.
That's interesting. One of my thoughts watching this was, I think that, obviously, I'm actually in the minority, I think, because I didn't relate to the movie, but I kind of think that part of it, like, that would be different if I was a different age. I think this movie really shoots for the, like, very young and then the parents. And I think it's very easy for me to see why people in those groups would strongly identify with this movie. And then there are the people my age who obviously do as well. But
do you know what scene? Yeah. Sorry, this is a 1.5 because this wasn't on my list. Do you know what scene I remember thinking was so clever at the time, and now whenever we watch it, I just kind of like, this is a slog to get through. Is the scene where they're going for like the compactor, and like sadness is just reading out like a textbook. Basically, it's like, this is deconstruction. This is a malleable. And I was kind of like, at the time I was like, oh, this is so cool. Now I'm like, all right, can we get through this? No one in the audience understands what's happening, right? Like, this is clever, but it's too clever. But anyway, and also like the rules there make no sense either, but it's okay. But that was my point. I wanted to talk about two other technical things. One is, well, before I talk about that, very brief also side point, is this is the movie that made me realize I have a pet peeve of animated movies, and it's a dumb pet peeve, but I felt, the moment I felt old growing up, like I wasn't a child anymore, really was when animated movies started including cell phones. Once animated movies were like, oh yeah, like steal mom's credit card, use your cell phone. It was like, I'm too old. Like, this 11-year-old has a cell phone. What's going on here? But one thing I adore about this movie there's a shot that always sticks out to me, but it's just honestly the whole cinematography style, is how handheld the real life stuff looks and how natural it feels like there's a camera there. There's a shot when she's leaving and the music is like swelling, and it's just like the shot. I don't know exact. It's like a very small pan type of thing, but the next shot after is just Riley like walking down the alley as the camera like moves up. But I just love the shot beforehand where it's like a close up on Riley as she walks past the camera. But just in general, I love how I mean, it also it's kind of like what I said about Joy and Sadness. Part of the reason it looks good is how like classical Pixar the inside stuff looks like, but the outside stuff to me, like, this looks so cool. It looks so visceral. I love how it's just air quotes shot and animated. And that's something I always want to give credit to this movie, because I think it's something that also, it's like the outside is just so dank and like dark, and I love it. And again, it's because of the juxtaposition they're able to get away with it. But I just think it's so cool. I just think this movie looks so great in the sense that, beyond also Ralph Eggleston's great production design that we should give credit to because he recently died, and I think this is kind of the apex of his production design. But yeah. But my last thing I need to mention, which I definitely need to bring up, is I think this is Michael Giacchino's best score ever he put out. I think the score of this movie is incredible. I think when the trailer for Inside Out 2 came out, and I don't watch trailers online, so I'm just like at Wish and the trailer starts, and I just hear that do 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 do. I'm like, Inside Out is back. The score to me is just so, and it all helps that this came out at the time where like I was really listening to movie scores like as I drove and studied, and this was in heavy rotation. I think there's a very like, I understand you have to give the Oscar to Ennio Morricone for Hateful Eight. I think this is my favorite score of 2015. I think this is a phenomenal score. I love every bit of it. And the thing I was thinking about very specifically, I didn't bring it up because I hadn't talked about the score yet. Is that scene I was talking about where the shot is so cool? It's like the music is swelling. It's like do 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 do, and it all feels like it fits in the soundscape of what the entire world feels like. And the real world and the like inside world feel different, and yet they all cohesively come together into this beautiful symphony of themes. And I think this is Giacchino's finest score because Up has that one track everyone loves. And otherwise, his stuff is like very actiony. I think Coco has a great score too, but it's overshadowed by like the songs. I think this is Michael Giacchino at his finest. I think this is his best work. I think this movie gets no credit. It wasn't nominated for an Oscar for best score somehow. It got no traction. I just think this is a really beautiful, beautiful score.
Mm-hmm. I felt that even from the very first shots opening this, I was like, I didn't recognize the composer, and then I looked it up, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's Michael Giacchino, you know? I just had that, like, weird thing, and I don't know, not to go off on this tangent, but you talk about The Hateful Eight, that movie is, like, it's at times, like, subverting the score, and I feel like this is a time in Inside Out where I feel like Giacchino really matches the material, and sometimes I do feel like another bright action score that could be from like a spy thriller.
Out of curiosity, I look at the other noms that year. There was The Hateful Eight, Ennio Morricone, which wins. There was Bridge of Spies, Thomas Newman. Sure, we love Thomas Newman. Carol, I don't even remember Carol's score. Maybe it's great. Sicario, I know you hate Sicario, but Johan Johansson is dead, so we will let him keep his one Oscar nom. And then The Force Awakens, which I actually posit I think Force Awakens and Last Jedi have underrated scores because people take John Williams for granted. Yeah, they have underrated. Those are good scores. But I easily would slot in Inside Out over all of these besides Force Awakens and Hateful Eight. I would slot in over Force Awakens too, but I'm saying I wouldn't kick out Force Awakens for it when there's better options to kick out. I think they're just a fantastic little piece of music, and for this movie throughout, but
I think so.
But yeah, those were my 3 points I wanted to get through that became 5 points. So yeah.
Well, I might kind of skip some things in our
we can
outline and all of that, because I think we've talked about a lot of personal things, and a lot of these are like personal prompts. But do we have any other like thoughts that kind of jumped out at us that we want to mention at the very end, or not?
I went through my stuff, so I'm done.
Yeah.
Don, do you have anything else you want to say about Inside Out?
Yeah, going back the like sickly sweet, but sadness was in charge of the mom and anger was in charge of the dad. So that was another thing where I guess they can't really explore like really multiple minds. They have to like really simplify, but that it makes sense why they picked Joy, but it could have been more interesting to like see
an angry kid.
Yeah, like driven by anger. That's your core thing. And then also like the weird little bit of gender where the dad was like militarized, and they went to like DEFCON 2 and had to do the like nuclear keys to put the boot down. It's like, why does parenting your child have to be on the same emotional scale as launching a nuclear war and ending the world? You know, I don't know. Like, it's a fun thing, but what an interesting choice to make.
What I really love about the beginning of this movie is I can't remember what she says for Fear and Disgust, because I feel like it's the same thing, but I like when they say anger is what makes you keep things fair, and like that's such an interesting way to put anger.
That was going to be my next point. They may discuss also like social, which is interesting, and from my understanding that is like the most recent with the research, but that was another like choice that Joy was in the lead, but then Riley's anger was concerned about justice. That's how they weighed it, and like honesty was a pillar, and honesty came from a happy memory. Well, some people's parents do not react positively to like honesty, and they're taught to lie. Like, would they have a sad lie memory, and that would be like Liar Island or whatever? I don't know. But yeah, the anger being concerned about justice, it's so very political, honestly. Like, no, a lot of people are not actually that concerned about justice, or they're yeah, they don't. Not all anger is righteous. You don't like inherently have righteous anger. I don't know that. Again, it's a children's movie, so it seems like
you want to be able
a great little way to explain that.
The whole purpose of the movie is also like to teach children like all emotions are good, you know. So you can't really be like anger is actually bad, you know. Like it'd be very easy to make anger the bad guy, you know, and you can't.
That is true, and I guess that's how I expected it to go on like first watch. That anger would be.
He's the one who says, "Let's run away." So in a way, he does come off kind of villainous then, but it's like. It's all metaphor anyway.
Yeah, that's true. And explaining righteous anger to a 7-year-old is probably a little difficult. And then just two little humorous observations. I like how they did use they used their San Francisco. It was like the grimy and everything, both to contrast with the inside world, but I think also because it's a child that moved there, she's always going to see it in a negative light, right? Because it's different. So it was like that. San Francisco was grimy, both to contrast with the internal world, but also as like a little bit of characterization that Riley doesn't really like it here. So she's not going to be looking on the bright side. It's just going to be, dingy and wet and all gross alleyways. But I like they use two little bits for San Francisco. One, Anger has his own little like piston cup joke where he says there's no bears in San Francisco. I was like, wrong. And then my first thought when they go through the tunnel, because I forgot it was San Francisco, they go through the tunnel to see the Golden Gate Bridge, and she's like really sad when she sees the house. I was like, well, this is actually still relatable for adults, that she's sad moving to San Francisco, where a child is sad because she had to go cross country. An adult is sad moving to San Francisco because the rent is astronomical, and that will bring you to tears when you move in. But yeah, that's all I got.
I do think there were good moments of humor here. There are the things that
I laughed out loud a couple times. It was a funny movie.
Yeah, there are some things that stick out to me that are like grown moments, but that's part of why I liked rewatching it, is because little things that aren't emphasized struck me as much funnier. Like a lot of Bill Hader's lines when he's like, "Oh, it's a good thing that Joy told me earthquakes are a myth. Otherwise, I'd be really worried about California or whatever."
Or like when he's like, "Well, there's 3 worst case scenarios, and the third is the being called out by the teacher, and it immediately happens." Like that's just really clever, like kid logic too. Like it's all really expressed through all these emotions. But Fear, I think, does get I said like you can't really sing line, but I do think Fear gets the best lines, and then Anger and sadness and Joy. I think the rest of them are really. I think Disgust is, if anyone, given the least amount of stuff to do. Which is why it's annoying that she's not back for a sequel about her being a teenager, because I feel like that's the obvious person to raise into the secondary role for a teenager movie rather than bringing in new characters. But whatever. I'm not Pixar. Who knows? But I think I was gonna say the other 3 outside of Disgust. Well, in Disgust 2, they're all more carried by performance, mostly. Whereas Fear is the perfect combination of Bill Hader and the writing for jokes. Because I think Joy and Sadness's jokes don't necessarily come from being joy and sadness. It comes from their adventure, and then Anger is so just like Lewis Black going ham on these lines, like that are like children being like, "You want to give us broccoli? You're gonna send us to bed?" It's just like, okay.
Yes, and I know I said I was done, but also quickly, Fear was the one who got the slapstick comedy, and I thought that was fun too. Where,
Fear has the funnest design too.
Yes, and reminded me with Disgust being the like least used character. I felt they were all like well characterized through their motion. Like I like how Joy was like super fluid, and like obviously they did a lot of like senior animator moments, as one of my friends calls it, where like she rolled down the hill and like ends up in like the fetal position, but it was all like really smoothly animated. And how like fear and anger and sadness move like fits their characters perfectly. But not only does Disgust not get that many lines, but she also doesn't like move.
She's got like she's got like the pose of like having her like her hands to her hips and like one finger up type of thing, like, you know, like very like
she does have the expressive
poses.
pose, but not like a walk. Like all, you know, anger has the trudge, and fear is like the little snake guy walking around. Where Disgust, I don't know. She didn't seem like as animated of a character as the rest of them.
I would like to, you know, get to wrapping up, but I did want to say I remember there was a big thing in the time this movie came out where it was like, why are the female designs just kind of blobs, and then anger and fear get to be these. I mean, anger is a blob, but he's like a goofy Muppet blob, you know, and then fear is clearly more designed than everything else. And that was why when the trailer for the new one came out, everyone's like, oh, cool, they listened to criticisms. Anxiety looks like a little nerve, like fear does, you know, like it is a female character that looks as goofy as the male ones do.
That's true.
But yeah. All right, let's wrap up because we are going long.
All right. A lot of shows, after they talk about a movie, they like to give it things. Some of them give them star reviews, star ratings, or thumbs up. We like to give the film a thing, like actually give it something, like you'd give a film a gift to show how you felt about it. Danny, do you have a gift that you'd like to give the film?
You go first, Mark. Sorry.
Well, all right. Well, I would.
You know what?
Give
I got it. Actually, I got it. Do you want to know what I give it? I think
Sure.
it's bullshit that I can go see Encanto in concert. I can go see Elf in concert, but I can't see Michael Giacchino's finest score in concert. In the build-up to Inside Out 2, we are going to put we're not going to put Michael Giacchino on tour. We're going to put whoever Disney's conducting people, because they do like Encanto and concert stuff. We're going to let this go on tour in concert. I would love to hear this score in concert. And I know I've given this award before to other movies, but this is one that I feel like is an underrated score that I would immediately buy tickets to, because I would love to hear some of these tracks live. And maybe they've done it before. I should Google Inside Out in concert to make sure I'm not being stupid. But yeah. No, when you search Inside Out in concert, it just comes up with like songs that are titled Inside Out, and like concert performances of it. So yeah, that's my choice. I would like to see give this a concert tour.
Well, I'm going to give this film, I have some books that I've been meaning to get to the thrift store because I don't think I'll ever read them, even though they seem like things that I would be like interested in. And I have some clothes too that I like shrunk in the wash, or that I got but I wasn't able to try on because for some reason all these fucking places now don't have like actual working like fitting rooms. So you got to take things home, and sometimes you can't like tailor them to fit or whatever. But anyway, I have this big bag of things I need to take to a thrift store, and instead of taking them to the thrift store, I would just give that bag to this movie.
You want to give this movie some garbage?
No. They're just things that I have no use for, but maybe someone else will.
Oh, I see. That's okay. What do I want to give this film?
This used to be my dorm room poster, by the way. I forgot to mention that. This used to be Norma the North and Inside Out. Those were my two door posters I used over the years.
I don't know. I guess I would give this movie a book. You know, like a little parenting book or self-help book or something like that.
5 love
it
languages.
Just seems... That's the puberty movie's the second one. I don't know. It just I guess I didn't bounce off it as hard as you did, Mark, or at least like I kind of had fun playing in the metaphor. So I almost treat it as like a little bit of like pop science almost, or a little bit of science communication. I know, like not really, but I thought it was fun. I enjoyed watching it, and hopefully some people got like an interesting idea of a theory of the mind out of it, and yeah.
Well, this was a wonderful episode.
Yeah, this is a really good episode.
Thank you for coming on. Sometimes we have people who want to or need to promote themselves on social media. Do you have anywhere that people can find you? Or
no.
Okay, good.
I'm not there. Don't look.
Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you. You've been a wonderful guest. I'm glad that we got to have you on here. Danny,
yes,
what are we? Yes, Danny, what are we doing next time?
Next time we will continue to be in the world of this film. We will not. I imagine it'll be like 3 times less. Like divide this episode length by 3, and we'll be lucky to reach that amount of runtime for that episode. We'll do next time. We're doing the 2 short films for this, which one of them is Riley's First Date, but the other one is something called Mind Candy, which I double checked to make sure it was actually accessible because it's not on Disney Plus. It's on YouTube. I'm very curious what that is. The basic idea I have from it is that it's what was going to be the DVD menu, but they decided to go with something simpler, and then they just released it as a short film. So it's going to be interesting to watch because it's very possibly just a DVD menu. But yes, we'll be watching Riley's First Date and Mind Candy as our next week. 2 short films set in the world of Inside Out that were both released on home video. Home video release for Inside Out. But yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Looking for the Ocean was produced by Mark Young and Danny Vincent.
Is the show over? Are we canceling the show?
This episode has been produced by Mark Young and Danny Vincent.
There we go. The show is edited by Mark Young.
Our original artwork was done by Sarah Knopf.
You can follow us on social media at Facebook at Looking for the Ocean, Instagram at Looking for the Ocean Pod, Twitter at Pixar Journey, and on our website lookingfortheoceanpixar.podbean.com.
Go on my Instagram and buy tickets to the show that I'm in right now, Mr. Marmalade. If you're listening to this on Friday morning, then the show is opening tomorrow night. So you can get tickets for that, and it goes for 2 weekends. They're mad cheap. I'm really happy about the company, and it will be a fun night of theater. So go check that out.
You can follow me, Danny, at Blank Mints on Letterboxd, where I will probably, this weekend at some point or during the following week, rewatch Soul in theaters, which I feel like I have to pimp out because as someone who originally started a podcast, like when I started my podcasting journey, my big running joke on the Wise with Ty and Dan was my deep desire, it wasn't even a joke, it was a real thing. I need to see Soul in a theater. I figured it out my way, and now I can just go to AMC and see it that way too, which is nice. But yeah, so you can follow me on Letterboxd at Blank Mints, and you can listen to my other podcast, which I don't know when we're putting out the next episode. I have to arrange that at some point, but it's called The Step Club. We talk about movies at the most Oscar nominations, no wins. And yeah, Dawn, thank you again for coming on. You were a great guest for as much as I trashed at points, I still think this is a great movie. So great guest, great movie. Good to have you on.
Yeah.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Woo! See you next time.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.